Hello everyone. In this next tutorial I'm just going to be going through how to actually put the components into the board. So at this stage you should have a drilled PCB and ordered all your components, and usually I just go through and print off the bill of materials and just tick them off as you go along. It might seem a bit unnecessary for this build because there's only 10 or so components, but when you get to some of the more complicated projects like phases and things like that, you can have 50, 100 components and it gets really confusing. So I usually just or if you're doing multiple projects, like I've done 10 projects at once, and it just gets too confusing, so I just put them all in their separate containers so I know what's going on with each. If you've seen the how to read components tutorial, you'll know how to measure and test the values. So just go through and go through one by one and put aside what the components that you need. We'll be soldering them into the board. Also with PCB, you don't have to etch your own PCB. In fact, I highly recommend buying your PCB from TonePad or Mad Bean Pedals, because it just supports the website. So yeah, I mean, and it's one less step that you have to worry about. So it's the etching your own PCB is optional. So I'll get my components ready into the Tupperware container, and then we'll start soldering them in. A couple of things with the parts list actually, as I was going through, I should probably mention Futurelec didn't have a 5.1K resistor, metal film or carbon composite, so I'm just going to use a 4.7K, which is probably the next closest value. And they also didn't have a 5K audio pot, so I'm going to use a 5K logarithmic pot instead. It's, as I mentioned in the other video, it's probably going to have, the tape is going to be a bit out of whack, but I'm not too fussed. But try and get the right values, but if you can't, just try and get the next closest one. Also, I put a note on the how to read component value tutorial about these sockets. You should order a row of these for the transistor to go into. It just makes it easier. If you accidentally put it in the wrong way, or if you want to change the transistor later on and experiment with different transistors, it just makes it easy. So just get some pliers and just snap it off like that. So you've got 3. And also, while you've got the pliers on the pot, there's a little, you can see there's a little metal tab. Just snap that off. You don't need it. So yeah, get rid of that while you're at it. So I've got all my components in the Tupperware container, gone through and ticked them all off, and now I'll be soldering them onto the PCB. You'll need a soldering iron, obviously, and also helps if you've got a desk lamp to use one of those as well, so you can see what's going on. So yeah, just get the go to the project file. I've got a computer in front of me, computer screen obviously, and just bring up the project file and follow the project file, going through one component at a time and soldering them into the PCB. You use a pair of pliers to bend the legs down like that before you solder them in, and the component goes through the side that doesn't have the tracks. I won't push it right through, but yeah, it goes through the side that doesn't have the tracks, so the legs come out the side that does have the tracks, and then you solder the legs on that side. Just make sure when you're putting in diodes and capacitors that you put them in the right way, because it's a very common thing to put them in the wrong way, and your circuit won't work if you do that. So go to the Mad Bean project file, and sometimes this layout actually is different from the one below, the black and white one. This is, if you've made your own board, you use this one. If you've bought the board from Mad Bean, you use this one. I think in this case they're actually exactly the same, but they often are different. The numbers on the board is just a quick explanation of what's going on with the board. Q1 is the transistor, the BS170. C1 is capacitor 1, D2 is diode 2, R2 resistor 2. The LED is the activation LED. Don't bother soldering that in yet, we'll do that later. SLAM is the pot, and don't bother putting in anything in out 9 volt ground in. Those happen later on as well. If you're new to electronics, you probably wouldn't know this, but the band on D2 and D1 is the negative of the diodes, and all diodes are polarized like electrolytic capacitors. They have to go in the right way. So just make sure that when you put them in, you put them in the right way, otherwise your circuit won't work. So I'm actually going to start with the socket for the transistor, because sometimes the sockets can get a little bit tight when all the other components are in, so I'm going to do that one first. So I've put it in the board, and now I'm going to put a bit of tape over the front just to hold it in place while I solder it, and then in my helping hands I just flip it over like that. See, if I didn't put tape on, it would just fall out. So yeah, put the tape on the front, and then I need some solder. Right, now I've got my solder. Just unwind it a bit like that, and you just want to put enough on but not too much. You don't want to blobby, and you want to make sure your iron is hot before you put the solder on, because it gets a better contact with the copper tracks. So you want to make sure you don't put too little or too much. Have a look on YouTube for some tutorials on soldering. There's a lot of tutorials on how to solder properly. It's something that comes with practice, but it's very important that you don't make bridges between the tracks as well. So if you put too much on, you'll find that things are connecting that shouldn't be connected. So yeah, just be very careful when you solder, particularly when you're new to soldering, because it's easy to make mistakes. One other thing, as you're going through, make sure you check what values you're putting into the board. It's very easy to put the wrong value into the board and then the board misbehaving in some way, and it's much easier to check it before you put it in than after you've put them in. You have to check the color bands and things like that to check the value of the resistors, for example. So just make sure as you go around you're checking the values. So with the transistor, you just cut the legs shorter like that, and you just plug it in. Make sure you plug it in the right way around. Check the PCB layout to make sure that you've put it in the right way around, and that's it. That's all my components are soldered in. In the next tutorial, we'll be connecting the pot and the cables and testing the board to make sure that it works properly. Thanks for watching, and make sure you subscribe.